My name is Shannon, and I'm so excited to be here. I'm going to be guiding you through the movement and yoga portion of our workshop this evening. So before we get started with our practice, I just wanted to share, as I was reflecting on this workshop and how we can use the practice of yoga to support wellness, overall well-being, especially right now, 3 things came to mind. So first, it's presence. So staying present in your body, in your mind, in your heart. The second is equanimity, the ability to stay calm no matter what's going on around you in the world, embracing steadiness and smoothness. And then the third is release. And that can kind of take 2 different paths. One being the ancient practitioners of yoga tell us that emotion, if it's not processed, can store in our body. So fear or worry can manifest in pain in your neck or tightness in your hips. So that's one variation. And then the other would be just the physical aspect. So if we're sitting at a computer all day, or if we're on our feet standing all day, or in a car, or hunched over a computer screen, just the realities of life, the opportunity to move, to stretch, to open your body can really create that space to release. So whichever aspect resonates with you, just the opportunity to create space to invite ease. So let's practice. So this is going to be about a 10-minute flow, and this particular practice maybe you won't be able to do at work, but components of it I am hoping that you'll be able to take with you wherever you might be. So we'll begin tonight in a comfortable seat. So whatever that looks like for you and your body tonight is absolutely great. And I also want to say, if you feel more comfortable turning your camera off during this portion, please feel free to do so. Let this be an opportunity to just find what feels good in your body, not worrying about anything else. So take a moment to just settle into a place where you feel comfortable. Allow your eyes to float closed. And allow your body to be still on purpose. Take a deep breath in and a full breath out. So in stillness, do a scan through your whole body. Notice if there's anywhere right now that's working that doesn't have to be. Softening your shoulders, your jaw, the place behind your eyes. Just taking a moment to check in. We'll take one more breath in stillness. And then beginning to invite movement into the body. Lead with your shoulders. Begin to sway from left to right. And so just an opportunity to check in with your side body, letting this be a flowing movement. And then if it would feel good, maybe sweep forward, making a circle. And if you're making a circle, circle in the opposite direction to create balance. And then find your way back to stillness at center. Take a big breath and stretch both arms up overhead. Exhale, drop your right hand down to the ground, stretching your left arm up and over. And so this can be done in an office chair, finding space through your whole left side body. Take a big breath in, a little more space. Exhale, release back to center, second side, left hand plants, right arm stretches up and over. Inhale for space. Exhale and come back to center. So here, walking into a gentle forward fold. So whether your legs are crossed or they're extended out in front of you, step your hands down to the mat. Walk them forward until you meet your edge. And so just noticing the relationship with gravity here, can you invite ease? Softening your forehead down to the mat or the ground. And your next breath in, slowly walk yourself back to center. Have your hands back behind you and lift your heart up towards the ceiling. So balancing that grounding forward fold by lifting and opening. Take one more full breath in here. And then slowly release back to a neutral spine. Step your hands in front of you. And we'll shift forward, coming to a tabletop position. And so setting up in a shape that feels supportive for you. The knees under hips, wrists, elbows, and shoulders in a straight line. If you're taking extra care of your wrists or knees, you can roll your mat up or place a towel or a cushion underneath. And then bringing movement into the spine, and your next breath in, lift your heart and tailbone up to the ceiling. Exhale as you round. And so maybe allowing your eyes to stay closed here to really watch what feels good. And really listen to what your body wants here. For the next couple of rounds of breath, move in any way that your body wants to. So whether that's twisting left to right or drawing a circle. And then as you feel complete, find your way back to stillness. Tuck both toes behind you. And just for a moment, pause here, draw your focus to the bottom of your feet. Creating space, inviting ease here. If you have more room to explore, press your hips back into your heels until you find what's just enough. Awesome. On your next breath in, floating forward, we'll transition into a downward facing dog. So keeping your toes tucked, knees lift off of the mat, invite length into your spine. And so as you arrive in this shape tonight, decide if it would feel best to be still here, or if it would feel better to bring in movement, maybe pedaling from left to right, pressing one heel then the other. Settling to stillness, look to your thumbs and walk or hop your feet until you arrive in a forward fold. And so really settle into this fold, letting the crown of your head reach for the earth, neck and head totally release. A soft bend in your knees to create a strong, sturdy foundation. On your next breath in, lift halfway up. Exhale to fold forward. Inhale and rise all the way to stand. Stretch both arms up overhead. Hands drawing to your heart. And so take a moment to arise into standing. allowing your breath to catch up. On your next breath in, sweep both arms up overhead. We'll find a side body stretch here. Reach up and over to one side. Inhale back to center, second side. Inhale, center. Release your hands, sweep them back behind you to interlace your fingers. And so here, lift your heart, lift your gaze, maybe even a soft back bend here, creating space in your throat. And if it feels best to stay lifted, honor that. If you'd like to hinge at your hips, allow your arms to float up overhead. On your next breath in, if you're hinging forward, rise back to stand. Release your fingers and find a flowing twist to let that fall. Arrive back to stillness. Take a big breath in, sweep both arms up overhead. Exhale as you fold forward. So in this fold, welcome a bend into your left knee. And so as you welcome the bend into your left knee, draw your right leg to straight. So this will shift the stretch into the IT band. If this is enough, stay right here. If you'd like to add more, coming to a twist, so your left hand can either rest on your left leg or meet the ground. Right arm stretches open. So creating space, continuing to breathe. Exhale as you release to center and switching sides. Right knee bends, left leg straightens. And choose your layer on this side, maybe staying here, maybe finding the twist. Take one more breath in. Exhale to release. So pausing here in this forward fold just for a moment, allowing any stress, any tension to roll off of your shoulders. And then on a breath in, roll all the way back to stand, stretching your arms back up overhead. Hands draw to heart center. As you arrive here, interlace your fingers. Then bringing movement into your wrists. Circle in one direction, circle in the other. Hands that may be tight. Right. And then turning this movement into a wave. So bringing and creating space in the wrists, elbows, and shoulders. Let the opposite wrist lead the way. And then when you feel complete, let both arms float by your side. Bringing movement into your shoulders, draw a couple of circles. Awesome. Letting both shoulders relax down and back. Inhale, stretch your arms up overhead. Exhale to fold forward. Inhale, lift halfway up. Exhale, fold, hands plant, step back to the top of either a plank or a kneeling plank. And then slowly lower all the way down to the mat. Untuck your toes, inhale, lift. Exhale to release. Pressing the ground away, rise up and over to a child's pose. So hips sinking back, arms stretching out in front of you, any shape that feels comfortable in your body right now. On your next breath in, float forward, coming back to a tabletop position. And then allow your legs to sweep to one side or the other, wrapping them all the way around to the front. So as you arrive here, find length in your spine, reaching tall through the crown of your head. Awesome. Welcoming a bend into your knees. Slowly roll all the way down to your back. Draw both knees in close, giving yourself a hug, maybe rocking left to right if that feels welcome in your lower back. And then coming to a twist, allow both knees to dip over to the left and look over your right shoulder. So to add a layer here, you can explore straightening your top right leg or both legs, only if that feels welcome in your body. Stay here for one more breath. And then rise up and over second side. Choose your layer, find what feels best here. Stay for one more breath. And then coming back to center. We'll just finish with a very, very short Shavasana. So maybe laying out on your mat or coming to a seated position, whichever shape feels most supportive in your body. And allow your whole body to be still. So eyes closed. After moving and stretching and opening your body, you return back to the place of intentional stillness. Take 3 more slow and complete breaths. And then when you're ready, lovingly invite movement back into your body, wiggling your fingers, wiggling your toes. Let your chin move from your left shoulder to your right. Find a big lengthening stretch up overhead. And then release in your own time. Slowly come back to a comfortable seat. Open your eyes. You can turn your cameras back on if you'd like. And closing our yoga practice, as we do most yoga classes. Thank you so much for sharing your time, your practice. And the light in me sees and honors the light in you. Namaste. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shannon. That was wonderful. My whole shoulder cracked. And so next, I'm going to pass the virtual microphone to Aubrey, who is going to guide us through mindful nutrition.
Lyra, before we jump to Aubrey, sorry about that, Aubrey. Shannon, in the beginning, you had mentioned 3 items to presence, calm, and what was it?
Release.
Release.
Thank you, Christina. All right, Aubrey, you are up.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Aubrey. Thank you so much for spending your evening or afternoon, depending on what time it is, with all of us. And Shannon, thank you for that practice. It helped calm my nerves a bit, so I am a little bit nervous. So I want to share with you all a little bit about mindful nutrition, or mind-body nutrition is really how I like to, what I like to call it. As a mind-body coach, it's really important to start to distinguish how connected the mind and the body are. And so much of stress in general, uncertainty, whatever sort of things, emotions that we're navigating, they have such a huge impact on so many parts of us, aside from just the stress itself, how things, other parts of our life get disrupted. And when it comes specifically to food, there can be lots of unwanted symptoms. Also, sorry, I talk with my hands a lot, so apologies that I'm waving all over the place. So these unwanted symptoms, they might look like stress eating, or they might look like I'm going to, treat myself, or I'm going to do this, that, or whatever. It can also look like physical types of symptoms, or it can be more physiological or stress related. So tons and tons of things. And I'm going to not get too far into that because I can talk for a really long time about it all. So I want to talk about one thing that not everybody is aware of when it comes to how stress affects us. So when we're feeling stressed out, or we're feeling emotional or overwhelmed, or insert any sort of, I guess we can call it negative emotion, it has a physiological impact on our body. So physiological means like the things that are happening inside of our body. And when it comes to chronic stress, and that can be anything, but we'll just use the last 12 months of a pandemic, whether it has had a significant impact on you and your loved ones, or it's just kind of like, okay, well, there's something going on, but maybe it hasn't, totally disrupted your life. The fact that there is something going on all of the time is sort of like running in the back of our heads. And so we like to call this a chronic low-level stress response. And so the level of the stress might be different. It might not be low level. It might be very much in your face. But for the sake of right now, thinking of it as a chronic low-level stress response, something that is always going. It's like the tabs that are open on your computer that you never close because you need them and you don't want to find them again. So it's always going on. And what that does to our body, to briefly define stress, it is either a real or a perceived threat. And so the response to that real or perceived threat causes things inside of us to become activated. And the biggest one of that I can think of right now is cortisol. So cortisol is a stress hormone. If you are familiar at all with the concept of fight or flight, cortisol is what sort of kicks us into high gear if we need to run or if we need to fight. So if you think about being in a constant or a chronic low-level stress response, your body is always releasing that cortisol. And so, not to get super scientific, in general, if you're experiencing some sort of stressor, there's like a release of hormones, and then it dissipates over a couple of hours. When you're chronically stressed out, it is continuously being released into your body. It's never actually going away. And so that can lead to tons of unwanted things. Cortisol is typically linked to weight gain or a really challenging ability to lose weight. So if you think about how much stress is going on just in general, and then how your body is always reacting to that stress, even if you don't know it, that can certainly lead to a lot of unwanted symptoms. And so physical symptoms aside, I want to dive in a little bit. My voice is getting a little crackly, excuse me. Dive in just a little bit about maybe some of the more common responses to stress, specifically when it comes to eating. So I will share these as my own experience, but they might be very general. And perhaps you can relate to them. Feel free to pop into the chat or raise your hands. I can't actually see you guys right now, but that's okay. If you want to interact, that would be awesome. So some of the types of responses to stress in forms of eating behavior, definitely comfort foods. So if anybody is familiar with feeling stressed out and being like, oh man, for me, it's like, oh, I really want mashed potatoes or like mac and cheese, or it's something about the texture, the warmth of it, and no matter what your food might be, maybe yours is like a crunchy thing, it might be a sweet thing, maybe it's savory, could be different. Everything has different qualities to it, and that's actually something that you can get curious about later on. So comfort eating, then a huge one is distracted eating or mindless eating, or I like to also call it less conscious eating. So it's sort of like you're going through the motions of eating, but you're not really paying attention to what's actually going on. That one is a bit more mindless. Distracted eating, eating while you're on your phone, eating while you're on this Zoom call, eating while you're driving, standing up while you're eating. Like, it could be anything that takes you out of the actual act of eating. And there's tons of studies about how just eating when you're supposed to be eating can do crazy things to improve digestion and all sorts of stuff. So another one, getting in the habit of using food as reward or punishment, in this case as a reward. Like, I'm going to treat myself. I had a day, I'm going to whatever, fill in the blank. And while that's totally normal, and I definitely do it myself, and I don't think we should beat ourselves up for it or over it, just starting to recognize the tendency to want to do that. And I'll bring that full circle in a bit. And then the last one for right now, I'm definitely not giving you a full comprehensive list, is under eating. So some people overeat or turn to different types of foods that might be out of their norm, and some people don't eat, or they eat significantly less. So stress shows up for all of us really differently. And this might sound silly, but whatever your behaviors around food are, those are coping mechanisms, more or less. And all of those were developed for a reason. And as a person who used to beat myself up over food choices or exercising or lack of exercising, whatever it might be, all of those things were created to help you out. So giving ourselves just like a little bit of grace around what our eating behaviors are, knowing that we can also begin to get more curious about them, be more aware of them, and start to change them. Let's just try and get rid of the stress around, oh my gosh, but I'm not eating perfectly, because you're just adding stress onto stress. And then that low level response is always still running. So what can we do to start to move forward with our response to stress and eating? Honestly, the biggest one is becoming more aware. And it sounds easy, it's definitely easier said than done, but becoming more aware and mindful of what's happening in your body and or what your reactions are to whatever's happening in your body. So maybe you're not entirely aware of what's going on here or anywhere here, and that's totally fine. That's a whole nother thing. But when, oh, I had this terrible day and I'm really angry, and now I'm reaching for a beer or a bag of chips or whatever that reaction is, just start to get curious and aware of those types of reactions. Because the longer that you do that kind of work, you can start to piece together which emotion is tied to which behavior. And when you're trying to eliminate certain behaviors, getting to the root cause, i.e. that emotion, is super helpful. Then another one, this one, again, sounds easier than it might be, but just slowing yourself down when it comes to eating. If eliminating distractions is impossible because maybe you have a house full of chaos all the time, or in this moment, you don't have the time to stop what you're doing so that you can eat and then resume whatever you're doing. Being able to just slow down. So that might be taking one big breath, like Shannon taught us, before you start eating. And if that feels like it's an easy thing that you can do regularly, great. Now you might start to add in that big breath in between bites. Maybe it's every 5 bites or every 2 bites or whatever that looks like. But that forces your body to actually slow down. And there's so many positive benefits from breath work that it helps digestion, but it also helps to turn on your parasympathetic nervous system. So if we go back to that idea of fight or flight, the stress response, fight or flight, that is your sympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic is responsible for your resting and your digesting. So if we can get ourselves out of that stress response, it improves digestion, the assimilation of calories, and a whole bunch of other things. Then the biggest challenge maybe is starting to eat when you're not distracted, or being really conscious of the act of eating. And I know I haven't touched on anything about what it is that you're eating, the actual types of food. I could talk about that for a really long time. If you have questions, I would love to cover that later. But when it comes to mind body nutrition, it's not necessarily about what you're eating, because if you're in that stress response, you could be eating like iceberg lettuce all day, every day, and you could still be gaining weight, or you could, hit a weight plateau. And I'm not to say that any of this has to do with weight loss, but if you're eating perfectly and you're still having these symptoms, there's so much more going on than just what the actual food is. So eliminating some of those distractions, putting your phone down when you eat. Maybe it means you just actually sit down. I used to stand while I ate, and it was what it was. Maybe avoiding eating in the car, or setting aside 5 minutes where it's like, okay, I'm going to turn my computer off. I'm going to place my phone over there, and I'm just going to eat. And so I do have a handout that you guys will get in a follow-up to this with, when I'm stressed out, what can I do? And so it's covering 3 or 4 of those major things, and some things that you can do to help with that. And in that little handout, it does lead you to some journal prompts. So Donna's going to be covering some journaling after this. As you're increasing your awareness around your food, your moods, your whatever, it's awesome to be able, sorry, I'm getting very dry. It's awesome to be able to jot some of that stuff down. So I'm not going to take away from any of that, but know that what you're about to learn after this the idea of journaling, writing stuff down, can be applied to a lot of this mind body nutrition stuff. So I'm going to pass the torch on to Donna. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much, Aubrey. That was just a wealth of information and all fabulous. I love the curious and aware, making sure we're not beating ourselves up, but just kind of just paying attention to what's happening. Donna, if you are ready, you have the stage.
Thank you so much. So if it's okay with everybody, I am going to screen share, because I have just a couple of slides that I wanted to share with you all today about journaling. Okay. All right, so hopefully everybody can see my screen all right. Excellent. So I am going to be talking today about journaling through a behavior analytic lens. So Aubrey, you gave me a great jumping off point for what I'm going to talk about with, kind of tracking some things to make meaningful changes in behavior, whether it relates to diet, whether it relates to what Shannon talked about with exercise and being more mindful, being in the moment. So hopefully I'm going to give you some tools that journaling can kind of facilitate there. So the first thing that I would like us to do is just do a sample journaling activity. So for the next 2 minutes, if you don't have a piece of paper or something in front of you, that's totally fine. Just give some thought for the next 2 minutes about 2 good things that happened to you today, and think about how they positively impacted your day. And then 2 not so good things that happened to you today, and how, if possible, you can avoid those occurrences in the future. So I am going to set a timer, and we are just going to take 2 minutes to give these items some thought.
Donna, we have a question about,
sure.
is it all right if they take a screenshot of
Absolutely.
the slide?
Yep,
Awesome.
absolutely. Please feel free to take screenshots of anything. So I see that some of you are still diligently writing, but that was the end of our 2 minutes. I'd be happy, Alira, to share these slides with you afterwards, and you could share them out with everybody. That way you're not trying
Fabulous.
to screenshot a whole bunch of things. So just to kind of put this into perspective, this 222 journaling activity took exactly 2 minutes and gave everybody an opportunity for reflection on their day, helped identify some sources of positivity or reinforcement, and also insight into sources of negativity, or what we in the field of behavior analysis call aversive conditions, and also how you can avoid them. So just a really quick activity that you can do that takes a moment of reflection, that helps you highlight some positive items in your day, and then give you some insight as to how to improve your tomorrows. So what I want to talk about with the majority of my time here are 5 easy steps to self-monitoring through journaling. And there are so many different types of journaling out there. I have an example here. I know bullet journaling is a really big thing right now. You do all these, beautiful designs and everything. For those of us like myself who are not that artistic, there are a variety of other things that you can use that will lead you to the same level of organization and ability to monitor your behavior through other methods. So the first step in any self-monitoring program is to identify the behavior that you want to change. The next step is to choose how you want to monitor the behavior, or basically how you want to do your journaling. The third step is to collect your data, or write in your journal, or enter your entries into your app, or whatever method for journaling that you choose to use. The fourth step is to analyze your data or reflect on your journaling. And then the last step is to choose your behavior goal and decide how it is that you are going to achieve it. So when we're talking about identifying the behavior that you want to change, you basically have to make a decision as to whether you are trying to decrease a negative behavior. So maybe a habit that you don't like, something that you're doing that you'd like to eliminate from your behavior repertoire, or increase a positive one. So a good practice that you want to improve or increase. Maybe you want to incorporate more yoga into, your daily routine, or maybe you want to be more mindful about what you're eating. Those are some examples. The examples that I'm really going to kind of focus on today are, I want to be more active, and this kind of goes along with what Shannon spoke to us about earlier, and then wanting to worry less. So those are 2 really big, broad topics. So in order to really affect change, you have to come up with a very clear picture of what you want to change. So instead of just kind of globally saying, I want to be more active, really kind of hone in on what you're going to do to become more active. So for example, I want to be more active by taking my dog for walks around my neighborhood, something nice and clear, very specific that you can increase. Or I want to worry less. Instead of just giving that big, broad, overarching, I don't want to worry so much about all of these things that are swirling around in my head. I want to worry less specifically about what my life will look like after the pandemic ends. So giving yourself a nice, clear picture of the behavior that you're looking to change. So next, and I know Alira is going to share some resources with all of you afterwards. There are so many different ways that you can monitor behavior. There are a ton of wonderful apps available on the App Store, Google Play Store. If you go on Etsy, there are wonderful bullet journaling templates. So I just included some examples here, depending on what you're looking for, what types of things you want to track and monitor. You could go in some different directions. Maybe it's something you literally just want a blank journal and you just want to be able to have a free space to write. That's absolutely fine. If that concept kind of overwhelms you and you don't want this big, scary, blank open page, there are some wonderful apps that you can use that really ask some nice guided questions, like this one that I have on the right here, where you have kind of like a Likert type scale of items you can choose from to reflect on your emotions, how you're feeling, different activities that you might have done in the day. And then there is a space that if you wanted to include just kind of a narrative, you certainly could. But like I said, if that feels kind of overwhelming to you, you certainly don't have to go in that direction. This example on the left of the screen really looks at, like I said, an example from like a Etsy shop where you could, take an example of a template like this and fill it out. So the next piece is collecting your data. And this is where you record information about your target behavior, so the change you want to make, in as much or as little detail as you wish, while paying special attention to the events immediately before and after the behavior that you want to change. Make sure you're making note of daily details, such as the different activities that you did in the day, maybe the weather conditions, the time of year, any special circumstances, and also paying attention to how you felt. Paying attention to these patterns in your behavior can really help better understand your habits and then make adjustments to be able to meet whatever goals you've set for yourself. So the next piece is analyzing your data. And this is the important part. When you're looking to make any kind of change in your behavior, you want to really go through your list of everything that you've recorded and look for any trends in the events surrounding the behavior you want to change. Perhaps you notice that you go for fewer walks with your dog if you wait until after dinner, or maybe you find that you worry more about life post-pandemic after watching the news. See if you can identify patterns in the daily detail information that you recorded as well. Do you feel better? Are you happier on days that you make it to the gym? Or are you less happy on days where you have a whole bunch of chores to do? Just being mindful of those recurring patterns in your schedule and in your behavior really help make yourself more in tune with what you're currently doing, and then also being mindful of ways that you can make changes. So the next piece and the last step here is choosing your behavior goal and how to achieve it. So you want to set an attainable goal for yourself. And while we would all like to be able to make immediate changes to our habits, change does take time. So maybe consider setting several goals for yourself with a gradual change over time instead of one big, change all at once. Think about those patterns and trends that you noticed when analyzing and reflecting on your journaling. Is there anything you can do to prevent the behavior that you want to change from happening? Maybe consider avoiding the news to prevent worrying about post-pandemic living. Or is there anything you can do to occasion the behavior that you're trying to increase? Perhaps set aside time to take your dog for a walk before dinner to make sure that you have enough time. So just a couple of other items to consider. One item is reinforcement. And I think, Aubrey, you spoke a little bit about this. So oftentimes what happens with adults is tracking and reflecting on your behavior alone is enough to affect change. Just bringing yourself to be aware of these, patterns and habits that you're exhibiting is enough for you to be able to, gain a little more control over it and make those changes consciously. However, when you have habits that have a long history, they might be a little more resistant to change and can require some extra support. So this is where you may consider using some kind of reinforcement or a reward for yourself for meeting your goal. And this could take a lot of different forms, from maybe a break from chores for a day, or if you did do some exercise, Aubrey, it would be okay to have a dessert after dinner, or perhaps buying yourself something that you've been wanting. And it's important that if you do choose to add in a reward component, that you make sure you stay true to your self-monitoring system and only reward yourself when you've met your goal. That really makes it something to look forward to and to work toward. The other item that I'd like you to just take into consideration is something called incompatible or alternative behaviors. So sometimes it's really helpful to come up with a replacement behavior that is either incompatible with or alternative to the target behavior. So whatever behavior it is that you want to change. And it's important that this is something you can do in place of the behavior that you're trying to eliminate. Basically, what you're looking to do here is to create a new habit for yourself. So when you're trying to decide on a replacement behavior to engage in, you want to think about how you do your target behavior currently and try to come up with something that you can't possibly do at the same time. So for example, chewing gum is incompatible with smoking because you cannot engage in both of those activities at the same time. Things like recalling a happy memory, imagining a favorite vacation spot, thinking about a song, counting objects or colors in your immediate environment are all cognitive tasks that are incompatible with negative thoughts. And they're really simple things that you can do. So they make really wonderful replacement behaviors for some of that. If you are feeling some anxiety or worrying, these are some nice things that you can think about instead. And by repeatedly making yourself think about these incompatible thoughts, it then becomes a habit. So I know that I am short on time, so I am going to pass over on this. And I just wanted to give you a couple of resources. There are some wonderful resources on the Chrome Web Store that are, you can add them onto your Chrome browser. Like I said, Etsy has some wonderful templates, the Google Play Store and the App Store. And then my contact information is here if anybody has additional questions about self-monitoring or journaling. So I will stop my share. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Donna. I love the simplicity, but like how powerful the 222 activity you had us do. I just love that. Thank you so
Thank you.
much for all of
Yeah.
that. And yes, I will send out a handout after our time together tonight. Probably will be later in the week. That will include information from all of our fabulous panelists. And if you are willing to share the PowerPoint too, that would be fabulous. All right, and without further ado, next we have Alex, who will be sharing some mindfulness tips.
Yes. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about some meditation and breathing exercises, and I am going to share my screen. Woohoo. Okay, so the first thing I want to emphasize is that I am not someone who lives in a place that I can meditate for hours a day, as I think most of us are not, right? We have commitments, we have other things in our lives that call our attention away. And I think often, especially in pop culture, the way that meditation and very serious mindfulness gets communicated to us is that it's an all or nothing proposition, right? You have to devote so many hours to it. It has to really change the way that you live your life in such a dramatic way. And so it's hard for us to relate to that because we have families and jobs and other things like Netflix that we also like to devote time to, which is perfectly fine. So I'm going to be talking about some ways we can integrate meditative thoughts and breathing into our daily lives. I think it's so amazing that Shannon did some meditative breathing with us, right? When we were doing our movement, that is a form of meditation, meditative movement. And then Aubrey was talking about stress response. So we're all just, the mind melt was really, it was happening and we didn't even know. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about stress in terms of burnout. So I work with students at a university, and I also work with faculty. So I work with, students and adults, both sides of that spectrum. And I think one of the things that we're all experiencing right now is that high level of stress all the time. And one of the things that we are not doing is always completing the stress cycle, right? So I think we're all aware of this fight or flight, the big cortisol surges that Aubrey was talking about that really amps our body up, right? And that's not always a harmful thing. Sometimes, historically, we would have had to run away from tigers and things like that. But even in our current life, right, sometimes we have a paper that's due, a project that's due at work. Sometimes our child has a project that's due that they didn't tell us about that we need to help with, right? There are things that come up in our lives that actually do necessitate a stress response and are helped by that stress response because we get stressed and we nail it. We do it in 15 minutes and it's magical. But we don't always complete the stress cycle. And that can lead to all this stress building up in our bodies, and it can lead to all the physical responses that Aubrey was mentioning, right? So weird sleep changes in the way your body might feel tense in strange ways, when our body, our muscles feel achy and we don't know why. Changes in our appetite. All of these things can be a representation of burnout. And one of the things that I want to draw attention to is the way that meditative breathing and really grounding yourself in your body can kind of help complete this cycle for yourself. So, ways to complete the stress cycle. So move your body. I know we've talked about it, we've all said it, and not everyone needs to be really into running or anything that's really dramatic in terms of exercise, but I think it is really important to remember that if you are someone who has an exercise routine, you already know that does complete that stress cycle, right? It makes you feel better. You get the really good hormones. The bad hormones kind of get processed, and you kind of feel refreshed. You feel like you're starting from a new page. That's because you've completed that stress cycle. It doesn't have to be crazy exercise. It can just be taking a long walk, but I think it's important to remind that moving our bodies is important and does complete that stress cycle. Breathing, some breathing exercises we're going to talk about can really help relax your body, release your muscles, things like that. Crying. if you ever feel like a really intense urge to cry, you realize you haven't cried in a while, that can be your body telling you, hey, I'm holding on to a lot of stress and I need to just let it go. That can be a really big signal. Anything creative, if you're someone who paints or sings or does pottery, anything that uses that other part of your brain, right? Not as analytic, very creative, anything like that, that it definitely helps release some bad stress. Laughing, especially with others. So I know we can't all be together right now, but even via Zoom, if you feel like you're laughing at the same time as a friend or a family member, that brings up such good stuff in our bodies and gets rid of some stress. And the last one is physical contact. So there's some really cool research about this. They tested it. So the 20 seconds is a tested length of time for a hug, which I just think is amazing. It is a hug that is not one of you leaning on the other, right? So it's a real like equality hug, if that makes any sense. But having that physical contact can really tell our bodies that we're okay, right? That we're ready to complete the cycle. We can let it go. I think it's just important to remember that we can't control the stressors all the time, especially in this pandemic, but we can control the ways that our bodies react to stress in terms of holding on, right? Moving from calm to stress and back again is really, really important for our long-term wellness. Okay, meditation. So as I said, it's a way to combat burnout. And it does not have to be sitting all the time. You know, we're going to talk about some more active meditative actions. And, but it is whatever you're doing, meditation is the action of focusing inward. So bringing your full attention back to yourself. It can help us feel like we're connected to whatever our something larger is, whether that's, you know, our bigger goals that we've been journaling about, whether it's feeling like we're talking to a higher power or just talking to ourselves, right? Whatever it really anchors us. Meditation helps us connect to that. It keeps us grounded in the present. So we're not worried about the future of this crazy pandemic world, post-pandemic world, or ruminating in the past. We're not in either place, we're in our present, which I think is really important. So sitting meditation, I think is the most common that we all think of. And that, you know, is wonderful. And if you have time to sit and do that, I think that's lovely. And it really does, if you can integrate that into your routine, there's tons of research about how that builds up our resilience. It builds up our senses of inner peace, builds up our sense of self, right? If you can bring your attention to your own breath when you're sitting and just sit for a minute, does not have to be for an hour. And just remembering that the process of learning, of practicing meditation, right? It is a practice. It's not supposed to be perfect. You're not born knowing how to meditate. That's just not a thing. But with time, you know, we can really get to a good place with it. One of the things that the way I learned is to think about your mind as the blue sky, right? So our brains are going to send thoughts as clouds into that blue sky, right? That's what our brains are supposed to do. If our brains stopped making thoughts, we would be in very deep trouble. So we should not assume that if our brains are thinking that we are doing it wrong, or we need to like buckle down and be like, oh my gosh, and get all stressed and be worried that there are thoughts, right? Because we're not supposed to be having thoughts. The best way of handling that is to watch the thought go by as a cloud and just look at the thought and let it continue on, right? Don't invest any emotion into it. Don't think more about it. I think that's a really important note as we hopefully start meditating in our daily lives, that thoughts are going to come and go, and that's fine. It's the force we put into them that makes them disruptive. So these are some gathas. So they are verses that you can use to help you meditate if you are not wanting to just sit and think about your breath, right? Which is always good. But sometimes, we're more easily distracted, something like that. So I will make sure that I send these slides along so you have them. But I love the cup of tea one, which I am both a coffee and tea drinker, but sitting sometimes what I do in the morning is I sit with my coffee and I say this to myself and take some deep cleansing breaths just for about 15 seconds, and it can really impact the rest of my day, just having that moment of quiet. Okay, so I know I'm running out of time, but I just do want to say that one of the things that I think is so interesting is that one of the meditation teachers that I love is Thich Nhat Hanh, and he talks a lot about how he does not just meditate when he's sitting, but he is like, no, that's so boring. I don't want to do that. So he will meditate while he does the dishes. That anything can be a meditative act, including washing the dishes. So this is a long quote by him, but I just love the idea that sometimes it takes him a little longer to wash the dishes, but he thinks about each dish and he thinks about his body while he's doing it, and that really leads him to a calming place. And if you can find other places in your life where you can meditate while walking, breathe with each step, notice the things around you while you're walking. I think those are really good opportunities to bring your focus back to your breath and your body in the present moment. So I also attached some of these breathing exercises, but I'll make sure you all have these. And then I have some resources at the end.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alex. Lots of good information. And yes, we will share your slides so people can practice some of what you shared as well. And we had one question about who it is that you follow. I think you were talking about Thich Nhat Hanh.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. His it's at the end of my slides, but living every step, living peace in every step. I think it's peace in every step. But one of his books is really, really good and has so many different of those like walking meditations, things that he meditates while he drives, which I don't know if I would feel comfortable doing that, but he thinks that, he's still alive. So.
Thank you. Wonderful. Let me switch back to gallery view so I can see everybody, and feel free to turn on your cameras if you feel so inclined. But now I know we're already at 7:02, but if people have questions, you're welcome to ask them. Feel free to unmute your microphone, or if you want to throw a question in the chat, I'm happy to read it as well.
Wow, everybody is that calm and in a state of peace that nobody has any questions. I love it. You ladies did a wonderful job. I want everyone to know that we really appreciate your attendance tonight, and we will send out, the to-go packet of resources, but we wanted to make sure that everyone can leave here tonight with just a bigger toolkit and something to revert back to, where some days meditation is what you need and other days it's journaling, and it's just a couple of different options that you can turn to when you need to decompress a little. So we really do appreciate all of you attending and hope that you can take something positive home with you. Well, I guess most of you are home, but take something away tonight.
Well, if anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free to send them. You should have my email and Christina's email. We're happy to connect you with our panelists tonight. I think will include their contact information as well in the follow-up information. So be resources to each other. We're all here for each other as we're all going through this just exceptionally challenging time. And thank you, as Christina said, for making the time to be with us tonight. It's great to have you all here. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a good night.